keep. Is it important for you to keep in touch with people?
Well, we are social beings. You know what they say about men, they say about women.
Mm-hmm. Can't live with them and can't live
We live
without them.
without them. And this saying, it's really about people in general. And it's not accurate that it's about women. It's about people. People about people. There are people whom you meet, you wish you have never met them.
Mm-hmm.
And there are people whom you meet, you wish you have met them a long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
You miss the time that you have not met them. You consider it a waste. So it's about people. And sometimes you lose contact with good friends, and then you meet them again, and then you wish you have never met them again. Such disappointment. But there are those whom you meet them again, and you feel badly about the time you have not continued seeing them.
And then there are those whom you don't get in touch with for a while, and then you find out they passed away,
And you feel very sad that you have not continued.
just recently Jack Younger, man.
Yeah, Jack Hinderman. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I did feel very sad, even though to me death is a good thing. But you do feel sad no matter what,
Yeah.
because you know there are very few people who are such good people.
And he was one of them.
And he was one of them.
So, do you agree with that saying? Some people, if someone tells you you're one of those people who could be counted on one hand.
Yeah, I think he was, as a human being, he was. He was a great artist. He was an excellent artist. But he was a wonderful human being. Good mind. Everything identify the word wonderful. He was. Since the first day I met him.
And how did you meet?
I was a graduate student at RISD. And Jack came in as a visiting artist. And we were a few graduate students in the painting department. And I liked him right away. He was very likable. And he was very down to earth. He was not consumed by his making it in the art market. He was himself. And then he knew that I was from the Middle East. And right after our talk at the studio, at my studio. And then he came over for, I believe, lunch, or it was before he left Providence, because he didn't stay in Providence, so he used to come over, I think, once a week for that semester. So we ate together in my place, my little apartment. And we had wonderful conversations about the Middle East, his experience in Beirut, and about his life in Europe, France, and we talked about my life in Italy and his life in France. And so there was a kind of common interest. So, as I remember, he came over once a week or something like this. Sometimes we go out, eat outside. So, and then I didn't see him for a while, maybe a few months. And then I graduated 1980 from RISD. And maybe a month or two after, I became Betty Parsons' assistant in New York. And that's when I visited him in his studio in New York. He was in the Village. And then I told him I'm with Betty Parsons, you know. And he was really excited to hear that. And he told me about some history, how he came to the US. Betty went to see him in Paris. I believe in 50, I'm not sure exactly what year, but it was in the late 50s. And she talked to him about coming to New York, and she told him about, you know, he knew about what's going on in New York. And he ended up coming back to New York. And Betty basically worked with him at the time. But it was wonderful to hear about the new school from him, directly from him, the abstract expressionist and so on, and know about these artists from him. He was the younger generation, and that was great for me to hear all these stories from him. And then I saw him again, and I saw him again, and then I moved to the Village, to the East Village, so he wasn't far away, and I was seeing him often. And I think in the mid-90s I saw him last. I went to show him my dissertation, and I had his work in my dissertation, and quoted him too. He was quoted in my dissertation.
Was it your original quote?
Huh? Excuse me?
Was it your original quote? Did you interview him?
No, I should have. I didn't think about it. It would have been wonderful to quote him directly, yes. But no. I quoted him through one catalog of his, and through other sources. And on the way out, I remember I was going downstairs, and he used to always walk me out to the staircase. And he said, well, let's get together again and make couscous. It's a North African dish. He said, let's cook together. And I said, yes. But right after, I believe, I lost my studio at the time. And so I ended up leaving New York. And I struggled for a while outside New York, back to New York, until I finished my orals, my doctoral orals. And after that, I left. I was in DC for a while. And from DC, I left. I traveled to overseas. I taught overseas. And I lost in touch with him. But communicated through calling him once in a while.
You did?
Yes. And once I sent him a book I liked. So there was, but not often, not often. And that's something with me, that I do lose touch with people that I like. Though they stay in my heart and mind. And life went on that way.
You could have met a lot of well-known artists. And he did offer, you said.
Oh, he was very generous too. He liked me and I liked him. And I don't think he was worried about me. Yeah, he did. But I didn't really, let's put it this way, I didn't care at the time. I liked him. I didn't care about meeting other people through him. I just liked him. He was a good man. Among the good men. I'm really so glad that I did include him in my dissertation, even though that chapter where I included him in, it was forced on me. I didn't want to write that chapter, but my advisor, I remember, insisted and fought for this inclusion of this chapter. So, in a way, including him in that chapter, it was a way for me to show appreciation to him for taking me in as a friend, and also to feel better about being forced to write a chapter like this.
Betty also offered to introduce you to
Yes,
her
she did.
artists.
She did. Well, she did offer when, after I saw for the Jack for the first time in his studio in New York, and I told her I went to see Jack the day before, Jack Younger, and she said, "Oh, wonderful, marvelous. But next time, if you want to meet any of my artists," even though he wasn't, but he was her artist, and she always claimed that he was her artist, even though he wasn't showing at the time there. But she used to include his work in the group shows. So she said, if you want to meet any of my artists, just let me know. I will introduce you through me. And I said, no, yes, thank you, but Jack Youngerman I met him when I was at RISD.
So then
She was very happy.
And also confirms you're not just also using the gallery.
I used to not attend the openings.
And
Their
that was a great opportunity too.
Of course. And that's when you meet the artists and the writers,
Mm-hmm.
you meet all these people that buy artwork, and and collectors and dealers and intellectuals.
You were told it's important to attend.
Yes. She scolded me once. Okay.
Yeah.
And I think in many ways later on, I felt that she had respect for me.
Yeah.
Because of my ways. Even though she disagreed, she wanted to push my work, and I'm sure she wanted me to mingle, and
Mm-hmm.
because it's good for me as an artist. And the gallery was a world that I'm not ready for, even though I did show my work, but it wasn't really the ultimate goal. That was not so much my goal. I did want to show, but I didn't work hard for it. I didn't plan for it. It's just things happen,
Meeting Betty Parsons, you also were not seeking her out. You didn't even know who she was.
Oh yeah, when I was offered to be her assistant, I didn't know who she was. I was ignorant, even though I was a graduate student in the painting department. But her name, for some reason, it was never mentioned.
Even though if you attended events, I'm sure you would have heard of her.
Yeah. Well, Lee Hall called me after my graduation, maybe a couple of months after. She was the president of RISD at the time, and I didn't know that Betty was her friend. And I didn't know who was Betty. But she asked me if I want to work in a very good gallery in New York, and I said, yes, sure. I don't have a job right now. I'm not teaching, or I'm doing just my work. She said, it's Betty Parsons Gallery, and if you are interested, you could start tomorrow if you want. Just go and introduce yourself to her, and she gave me Jack Tilton's name and Betty Parsons' names, and she said go, and I went, and I started the same morning. And
How did you introduce yourself to Betty?
I just when I walked in, Jack Tilton was there, and I said I was, Lee Hall told me about working here, and he immediately knew about it, and he introduced himself and took me to Betty and introduced myself, and I was hired. And they told me, you will be librarian, you will be in charge of the library. And they told me a few things and started.
And it wasn't until months later that Betty found out you were actually an artist.
And it was all accidental.
Mm-hmm.
I thought Betty already knew.
Mm.
So, and I didn't introduce myself as an artist.
Yeah.
So,
You assumed.
yeah. So I was carrying actually a small work. It was wrapped up. And I was going to show them at a gallery called Miniature Gallery. And Jack Tilton said, what do you have there? And I told him it's a small work, my work. And he said, let's see them. And I said, well, I'm going to take them to the gallery and maybe show you something else or something. So he insisted. He said, let's see them. And I said, but Betty is going to come here and I don't want her to see my work like this. Mm-hmm. He said, don't worry, she's not coming at this time. So I took them out and put them against the desk. It was Wendy's desk. And he looked at them and he liked them. He liked them a great deal. And we were talking about them, giving our backs to the other space where people also could enter. And then all of a sudden we heard, marvelous. That's marvelous. It was Betty behind us. So we moved apart and she was in the middle and she said, who is the artist? Mm-hmm. And Jack Tilton was on her left. And he said, that's Abe. They called me Abe. And she looked at me, I was on her right, and she looked at me and she said, and I thought you were a dancer. And I didn't say anything, and she said, it's very good work, and complimented me. And then she looked at Jack Tilton, and she said, let's have his work in the gallery. And Jack was, with a smile, he was very happy. He was naughty. He knew Betty is coming. And maybe he liked the fact that I didn't push my work. Maybe he respected that.
So in a way, he did the introduction.
So he did the introduction. And she walked in and she said, come with me. And she immediately was talking about putting me in a show. And later, of course, I knew it was a Christmas show. And she was talking about giving me a one-person show. And immediately, I mean, she was Betty Parsons was one of the most generous people. She was very generous, a human being, in many ways. And she didn't care where I came from. That was never mentioned. She didn't even ask me about my background. Never. She was interested about the work.
And how you think.
And how I think. And I'm really glad that I was introduced that way. The way she liked my work, not knowing who was the artist, that was really, for me, it was
huge compliment.
It was an amazing compliment. It was a great excitement for me, more than compliment. She has an amazing eye for art. That was her thing. That was good.
Memories of Betty.
Well, I'm someone who did not like flowers being cut. I'm someone who didn't like buying flowers. But the way Betty treated me with respect and, well, as a librarian in the gallery, where I worked basically was an extension of her office. So once in a while she will call me and I would be there, you know. I would be with her sometimes. So sometimes with her, if I stand up too much, there was always a chair there next to her desk. I would just sit there and sometimes we talk, sometimes we don't, and you know, just and just the way she treated me. And sometimes we talked about art or talk about her previous artists, Jackson Pollock, for example, or, you know. So at one point I started buying, there was actually one guy was selling roses on the street. And so one day I bought one and I brought it to the gallery and I said, oh, Jack said, you brought a rose? I said, yeah, this is for Betty. I said, this is just for Betty. And so he kind of smiled and, you know, as himself, you know, he doesn't, sometimes he sets you up, you know.
He doesn't say what is on his mind.
Yeah, he doesn't say what's in his mind. So I took it to Betty and I said, Betty, I got you a rose. Said, I normally don't like flowers being cut, but for some reason I felt like getting you one. So she looked at it for a while, and then she said, and then she called Wendy. She said, get me a vase. Put water in it. She took the flower and then she put the flower in the water herself. And then after that, I bought her another one. And I don't remember the spacing of time, but I did buy once in a while a flower from this guy. And I thought I will help this guy. He looked like he needs help. And I buy her flower and she puts it there. And then time passed. I went overseas and I came back. And then I knew that she died. And for her memorial, I was invited to attend. And it was in her gallery, still her gallery. And I sat there among other people. Jack Yangerman, by the way, was there. And other artists and writers and collectors. And people start talking and telling stories. And I don't remember who told the story of Betty hated roses and flowers being cut too. And I was sitting there.
Especially roses.
And I don't remember exactly who said it. But for some reason, for a period of time, she had roses on her desk.
That's funny.
And they were laughing, you know, at the irony. And then finally I said, that was me. That was me, and I never knew about this. And they were laughing again. She was more for life, celebrating life. Yeah. And she, once in a while, she would bring a poem. She will write and she will post it in the office. Between the two galleries, there was a small wall dividing the two galleries, and she will post it right there.
And maybe at one point you didn't get her a rose and she was wondering where.
I don't remember any of this.
Okay.
No.
Yeah, that's why it's good to
Yeah.
record more often.
I mean, if I have recorded all this much earlier,
Mhm.
yeah, definitely. Time passed by. But there are certain things I remember because I repeated the stories. So kind of printed those stories. For example, the story of her driving in the wrong lane. Yeah, I mean, that's where actually the same street where her gallery was. And I used to go with her sometimes to her apartment. And I would, sometimes she would drive, but sometimes she wants me to drive. One of these times she said I would drive. So we go to the garage and drive her car, big car, American car. And so she was driving, and she was, it's a wide street, I think 47, I believe. 47. 57, sorry. That's where her gallery is. And so she was driving, and I was sitting, we were talking. And we were talking about things. And then I looked and I started to realize that some cars are beep, 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 beeping. I realized that we are in the wrong lane. We are driving in the incoming lane. And New York is very busy. And I looked at her and she was talking. And I looked at the road again, and the cars are going left and right, avoiding us, and beep, beep, you know. And I was, for like maybe a second fraction of a second, in dilemma to tell her that we are in the wrong place. And I decided to not tell her because she was just driving, and the cars are avoiding us. And I thought, if I tell her, she may actually cause an accident by trying to move to the other way. So I just didn't say anything. And she was talking, driving and talking. And we got to 6th Avenue. And she took a right without all that chaos. And then finally we are in the lane that we're supposed to be in. And that's when I told her, I said, Betty. And she said, yes. And I said, never mind. And I never told her.
Oh,
Never told her that.
wow.
And that stayed with me. I never told her. I never told anyone about this. I don't remember telling anyone, at least.
Well, you told me
To be more exact. Yeah.
decades later.
I don't know if I told Jack or Jack Tilton or not, but yeah. But I told it as a story years ago after as a funny story.
Yeah. You would have tea at her apartment?
Yes.
Did she tell you you have to make your own?
No, actually, she used to make the tea.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah, I think she liked making the tea.
Interesting.
She brings some cookies. And the tea, she used to make it in a ceramics, very fancy ceramics cups. That was her thing. And sometimes we sit near those, they were smaller area, Sometimes we used to sit in the living room. And in her living room, it was in the center, over a couch on the right, when you enter the living room, on the right side. It was Jack Yankerman's painting. It was a beautiful painting, gorgeous. Betty Parsons was a very interesting human being. She never really talked about small things, or we could say small talk. So I will conclude this interview with this.
Yeah, that's good.
It's kind of fun.